Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Don for Don Alpha channel. Welcome back to another series of GINR, which is pretty much the global international news reviews, which we'll be doing here. It's in a series which I started a few weeks ago, and we're just gonna keep on doing that, bringing you the most interesting news here, right here, assessing everything which is happening around the globe. Today, I'll be looking pretty much at the summit which was held in France by Macron, which is called the new Global Financing Pact Summit, which they were discussing about different issues which has been happening in the world, with the Ukraine war and the wars in Africa, all this kind of stuff, and how they can finance different projects in the world post COVID-19 pandemic. Even some projects in Europe as well, they still need to be financed. So it was a very, very good summit, looking at it from an African perspective, and what our leadership was doing there. I think this is the kind of leadership everybody has been looking forward to have, like Africa being represented at a world stage, at a world forum, at a world platform properly. Not having some timid, scared leaders which doesn't represent the interest of the people when they go on international forums. Most of the people, most of the commentators, most of the economists I know, most of the guys who I know who do business news, they have been very, very pleased with the effort the guys put in France. And we look forward to see them doing better, even better, in terms of implementation of all the aspects they discuss in these summits. I'm going to start just looking at what HH, the Zambian president, Handle Lema or something like that. So that's why I'm just going to call it in short, like HH. His remarks were really good towards the end of the summit, when he was saying most countries, they don't just have to export conflict into other nations, putting a lot of resources to export conflict. This is something which he was mentioning towards the end of the summit. And I think it's something really good when you highlight it and you put it open there, that why investing so many resources, and you come back and then you say you want to invest in climate change. Otherwise, it won't help. Like, how can you focus on climate change when people are dying? Although we know that these wars, some nations benefit from the war, which, like by selling equipment, war equipment, and all this kind of stuff, and exploiting resources, actually, of those nations who will be fighting, like Sudan and Congo. They've never been stable, but these are the most richest countries in the world, in Africa, with a lot of resources, especially like the rare resources like coltan and other resources which are in these nations. You see? So that was really good. And the idea of just enforcing that there is need actually for follow-ups. For when you have done the summit, there's need for you to go and talk to the technical people who does your accounting, who does your scheduling for projects, for them to be executed in time. I think that was a really good contribution. And we also look at what Ramaphosa was saying, that like he was the president of the AU. You need to do better. We'll talk more about what I see AU can do, which can help Africa. But what they're doing, he was the president of AU during COVID. So he was saying that when he was trying to get the vaccines, he wasn't being treated properly, like he was being treated like a beggar. But when you look at these things, most of these companies, the bigger companies, they are from Europe, right? Europe and America. Unfortunately, that's how it is. We need to develop some our own companies as well in Africa. It's also an opportunity in a way, if you look at it on another side, like, of course, they're going to take care of their people first. They're going to take care of their people first to a certain degree before they take care about us Africans. So Whether you want to buy, you're saying the vaccines have been produced and they're holding them. They could be storing them for sometimes. There were some issues as well with their efficiency. Some were retested, so some were to go back into the lab again, and then they changed some formula a little bit because they had some side effects to other people, and when they were doing some of the experiments, some people died. So you won't know why they are holding them, but I understand that there was a delay. I'm not giving an excuse, but it's an opportunity for Africans to develop our own research and development, especially in the pharmaceutical, so that we have our own research boards for medicine. Because when you look at it, how can you rely with another nation when the borders are closed? How can you rely with the other people to send you the vaccines when everything is shut? They don't want probably even to ship anything to you, because whatever they can ship can come with the viruses. It has to be to be disinfected and all that kind of stuff when you're shipping. So there's a lot of protocols which is supposed to go through any shipment, but it's not an excuse. I'm just trying to say, like, in another way, Africa has to develop. You have to be self-sufficient as a continent, because AU has to have some teeth. AU has to have some teeth. Instead of just going to complain at the World Forum, you should also look at AU having some teeth to implement such cases in a way that we develop our own organizations which can build some institutes which are merely for Africans, which put African interests first. African interests are just as important as American interests. When America is coming to Africa, they are coming for their own interest. When they're coming to wherever, in any country they are going to, it could be in Europe, they put American interests first. And they don't hide it. It will be on the news that they are protecting their own American interests. When Russia is doing the same, they are protecting Russian interests. Everybody, Chinese, they are protecting Chinese interests. The Europeans, they are protecting European interests. Who is protecting African interests? That's the question you're supposed to ask each other at AU there. Because if you're just in AU and you're not taking everything into consideration, then it will be an issue. It will be an issue that you are neglecting some of the things, thinking that you have to be served with the bigger companies instead of trying to build your own. You're going to start small, definitely, and building it bigger and bigger. But since if we unite as Africans and try to build our own, it will be a bigger thing. How can it be small for 54 countries to put some few billions, even 3 billion, divided by 54 nations? It will be just some small millions. We'll build a big pharmaceutical research and development center. But we don't have these kind of ideas. I don't know why we have to go and complain. We have to go and complain, go to IMF, to go to Europe. You got to, you don't have to do that, to be honest. For me, I feel like the moratorium thing was very, very important. But anyway, we'll go to that. So Ramaphosa also went to talk about it, like he was feeling like beggars in the corridors asking for vaccines, and they don't have to be treated like beggars. It's a good contribution. It's a very, very good contribution, but it also should also have self introspective. Because if you don't look into yourself and what's actually going on in your nations, in different nations, how can we build? We should use these companies as benchmarking. Because if you take like some of these countries which have developed in a short period of time, like China and Singapore, that can help us to develop in a short period of time as well. So it was a good contribution, but it will also go to Ruto. Ruto was talking about building like a new financial mechanism for. I understand we need to build this multilateral financing bank systems, but to be honest, if you think like the IMF, they're gonna shut the IMF to build a fair financial system, I think that's probably. I think we are dreaming. Why? Why am I saying that? As Africans, there's no one else who's gonna put African interest first. These things has been happening, man. Mugabe and the Mugabes, the Gaddafis, they died just asking to get a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. But nothing was done. Up to now, up to today, we don't have the UN permanent seat in the Security Council. The whole continent of Africa. So nobody's representing us on other those aspects. Just the same with all these climate change, and because when the G7 sits, do you think they'll be talking? What will they'll be talking about? They'll be talking about ways of how they can come and exploit us, how they can invest. To them, it's an investment. It's not like exploit. We feel like we are being exploited because we are not implementing what we are supposed to do. We are not looking after ourselves, after African interest. But if we look even at the Africa Development Bank, top 10 investors. First investor, number one investor is Nigeria. Number two, America. So we got 5 investors. In top 10, we got 5 investors who are probably in the G20. Or probably mainly most of them are in G7. The Canadas, the Japanese, and it's sad. But so what do you think when the shareholders sit down and have the board meeting and try to see how they can direct their money or invest their money? What do you think will be the interest? Do you think that will be like solemnly the interest of Africa? Are you telling me that 54 nations cannot sit down, put money together and build their own banking system? Which works? You put like even 4 million a year? Or you can put 5 million or 10 million or something better than that. It's just an example. You can put more than that a year, and then you use that money for development. How are we failing to do that? I don't understand, man. For me, I don't understand. Like, why would Africa, you run around the world going to Ukraine, Russia war, you know that you're not going to get any results, just a tokenism kind of a visit, which makes you not to be so pushed around with America, but which is good in terms of PR and taking global decisions. It's okay. You're put on the map, but when you look back on Africa, what are we doing for ourselves, for Congo? There's a fighting in Congo, which has never ended. Taking years and years and years. There's fighting in Sudan, which has never ended, and Sudan is very rich in oil and other minerals, gold reserves. What are we doing to protect that? As Africa, are we failing to build a united African army? Because we're not putting resources together. We need to create our own financial institutions which can work. We need to make AU have some teeth. Otherwise, Ruto can be talking a lot of good stuff, but it's all, if it doesn't get implemented, it's all blubbering. There's no way they're going to shut IMF and build another institution which you think will be fair, including Africa. I don't think that will happen, never. That's why Macron was just only saying we can do reforms. If you look at that conversation, we can do reforms. Ruto was saying we want to transform the financing system of the globe and build another institution whereby people can contribute and they get money according to the way they contribute, putting the capital in there because of the cost of capital at the moment. And some other countries which can't even service their own debt because of coming out of the pandemic and other issues which are just happening around the world. So, if inflation is affecting the world and African countries, why don't we build our own institutions? That's the question. Solemnly African institutions. Why don't we do that? I don't understand. Why do we need to go to IMF and just beg for money? Why don't we just take our own money? We take some of these decisions by ourselves because you can go and ask for a moratorium from IMF to say that you'll be given 10 years holding their money, and then you pay back after 10 years. Those are good ideas from an African perspective. Get me right. But when you look at business, do you actually think that it is, but to them it's an investment. Do you think they're going to allow you to do that? To give you 10 10 years without paying, and then just using your own budget. Like if you have 10 billion each year using to service debt at the moment, you use it to develop your countries. It's a good idea. It sounds really good. Because those institutions, when they were developed, Africa wasn't included. But it wasn't by mistake. It was by design. That's one thing you have to understand. So for them to stop IMF and World Bank to do that, it's like they are shutting their own economies. We have to be frank on these things. You are being frank. The African leaders, when you're going there, is good. But you have to be frank when you're in AU so that you understand each other. Why are you sitting there in AU not deciding for our own African interests? What are the African interests you have? African interests shouldn't be about going to IMF or to the international platforms and say some good stuff. It should be about being frank on each other as well as Africans. What are we doing for ourselves? Because you go to Paris, you're talking about the Grand Inga Dam project, which is 80 billion. The feasibility which was done by an American company, 80 billion for that project, which will produce like 4,800 megawatts, which is good. You're looking at exporting power even to Europe, and 15 countries are involved on that project. How are we failing to fund that project? If you feel like 80 billion is a lot of money, then we can't afford it because we are servicing debt. We need to figure out how can we deal with them. Because if you make a decision as Africans, like, no, we are not going to pay. No one is going to be attacked. We need this to force it, to get this decision done. Because if you are going, just like 6 presidents are going to Paris and then they are representing us, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to implement them. That's when you see that all the good objectives, all the good aims you go with, sometimes they don't get implemented. They don't get implemented because they will be destroying their own economies. So, because if you understand the value of money, time value of money, because if you say you want to pay back in 10 years' time, the value of money will be quite low. Except if you say that the interest will be just keep on being pumped on the loan. That's the only way they can give you that moratorium to say that you're going to pay in 10 years' time. Otherwise, you just have to keep on servicing the debt. But if you sit down as the Africans, you can make up some decisions which is better for Africa, for African interest. Like if you have, if we say a gram of gold is 1,000. If it's 1,000 in South Africa, it has to be 1,000 in Egypt. If it has to be 1,000 in Tunisia, it also has to be 1,000 in Mozambique. But we don't have this kind of constitution at the moment. That's why the EU works. That's how the EU works. They have the federal organization. AU should be a federal African organization. That's where all these small constitutions should subscribe to the AU. As long as the AU doesn't have any teeth, there's no way you're gonna say you want a fair treatment in the international platforms. You can say whatever you want to say. You want this, but doesn't mean that you're gonna get it. Just because you're saying it doesn't mean that it's gonna be given to you. You can go and say it a lot. You can cry. You can scream. You can get all the applause you want. But when they sit down by themselves as G7, they plan for you. You can be changed like today. Close your coal mines and start buying solars. And then these solars, they can't even pump. They can't even give you enough power to run the seat. Except if you have like a bigger field with a lot of solars. That's when you'll be able to power the whole seat. But we can't just do it like that. It has to be gradual. Any visions, goals which comes from G7. Sometimes if we are to represent ourselves, we also have to tell them to give us a lot of time. But I'm surprised with Africa. Why are you leading the global climate change? I don't understand. Climate change in Egypt, climate change in Kenya coming soon. Well, you can see like, oh, I'm now on the world map. You can say a lot about the climate change, but Africa produces 2 to 3% of the world global emissions. You're not as industrialized as that. You can teach me about globalization and all that, but come on, man. I would think like China and America has to lead that conversation because they're the major producers in the world of all these emissions. And at the same time, I also think like if a cyclone is yet to happen in California, it will just happen. If a cyclone is supposed to happen in Mozambique, it will just happen. No matter what we do about it, I think it will just happen. We can talk about clean air and all that, but in Africa, man, we are not that industrialized. So we still need the industrialization revolution. For us to actually perform better on the world platform, we still need industrial revolution. So when you look at all these things which has been happening, I think Africa, we need to sit down and get ourselves organized. To get ourselves organized, to look after ourselves, after African interests. As long as you don't look after African interests, don't ever think that IMF will change their policies for you. It wasn't by mistake. It was by design that Africans will pay more interest and the European countries will pay like 2%, German paying 1% or whatever it is. They always get better terms because they look at themselves as good clients. You know? Their credit history is good. They always pay on time. We as Africans, we default because we always we raise money. Let's say in 2023 year, we raise revenue as a nation. We will sell our goods, whatever, we collect tax, we raise like 5 billion. When we get the money, instead of using it into invest into our projects, we are servicing debt. We are paying the debts, IMF. Now, we are broke again. What do? We want to do a project to do the roads and whatever, service other stuff. We go and borrow again, same year. We're going to borrow in 2023, we're going to borrow again. That's the money. Now we are using loans. Next year, the same thing, we raise money, we service debt. We are broke again. What can we use in our nation? We go borrow. We are already in the debt trap. There's no way we're going to run out of it. It's hard, but we have to find a way of how we can take ourselves out of it. The only way we can take ourselves out of it is by planning and putting African interests first. We only have to unite to remove the borders, to remove some of the unnecessary taxes of moving goods from Zimbabwe to Botswana or moving goods from Zimbabwe to Congo. Moving goods from South Africa to Congo is supposed to be easy. We have to plan some of these projects by ourselves, our own financial institutions. The idea of thinking that IMF, we have to figure out how we can do it. How we can deal with the debts we have right now. We can stop this debt trap system. Those are supposed to be the things we discuss as Africans. To sit down and discuss as Africans. We are 54 leaders here. How are we going to get out of debt trap? I understand the problem is some of the countries are developed, like Morocco, the Tunisians, the Arab world is way far developed than the southern. The southern part, we got a few countries, just like South Africa. The Namibians are good, but they're not that well built in terms of infrastructure. We need to develop the southern part of Africa, the global south. So how are we going to do it? We have to sit down and find a way of how we can take ourselves out of the debt trap. There's no one else going to come and save us. The African leaders, there's no one else going to come and save us. You have to be frank, honest, talk about ourselves, serve the African interests. Because when you look at I don't know how you think about it, man. Do you think like all these people you are servicing, we can't service our own youth? We can't service our own youth. To get capital is very expensive because of the interest rates. As long as the interest rates are around 12%, 18%, they are too high. So we need the affordable capital. How can we do it? These are some of the things as AU should discuss. But some presidents are so nasty. So if you have that like a federal constitution, everyone has to subscribe by the federal constitution. If it's not doing right, you can confront somebody like, why are you not implementing this which you discussed about? Why are you not doing this when we discussed about it? Why are you not fulfilling what we discussed about? You can confront one person. It would be easier to confront even the war in Sudan if we had an African budget, an African army. We don't need any other foreign powers to come and intervene in Sudan. We can intervene ourselves. But that is if we have a foreign army, foreign united African army, which can safeguard our interests in Africa. As long as we don't have that, there's no way you're going to say you're going to go to these world forums and be treated respectfully if you can't arrange your own house. We need to arrange our own house. Charity begins at home. Because going to all these big and world forums and talk whatever you want to talk, you can talk tough, but you need to implement stuff in Africa for Africans. But there's no need of ignoring Zimbabwe. Let's say South Africa ignoring Zimbabwe or saying they're going to solve whatever their issues are by themselves. You need to talk and push the guy. Like, hey, what are you doing, man? If you said the whole Africa is going to be democracy, let's supervise our own democracy in Africa. Why do we need somebody from somewhere else to come and supervise our own democracy? We can supervise ourselves. That's how all these European Council you see, or European Parliament, when they sit down, that's what they'll be doing. Help each other. The better countries like Kenya, all this South Africa, Nigeria, you come up with a solid constitution whereby the small countries, the Guinea, the Zimbabweans, they will come up. The Zambias, because the building which is being done there, the infrastructure development which is being done there, it's very slow compared to other nations. It's very, very slow. We are moving at a very slow pace than what is required to serve the people. And to just reduce corruption. The money which is for public good, it has to work for public goods. These public goods, they have to be, all the budgets has to be checked. The African leaders have to be more accountable. It's for all the blame will be on African leaders. No matter how you want to go out there and try to look good and all that in your suits and all the bodyguards, if you're not implementing the good policies in your country, there's no way we're going to be better. Except when we start being accountable of the money you're getting, because every country raises income. It's only that it's how it's being used. That's where the corruption comes. Sometimes a minister gets 5 million for a 12 billion thing, and now you don't implement anything. You're compromised. You can't even take this, you don't even know what kind of minerals are coming out of this mine. There's no government representative in those mines to know what is coming out of the mines so that we can tax them properly. The countries like Algeria, I admire them because recently Algeria had a big investment with Russia. I think they're getting 51%, if I'm not mistaken. The government is getting 51%, and Russia, as a foreign investor, is getting 49%. How sweet is that deal? How sweet is that deal? How great is that deal? Just because of negotiations. They are better at negotiation. What's wrong with the Southern Africa, Central Africa? What's wrong? Let's enforce these things. But that can only be enforced through AU. You need to give some teeth to AU. Anyway, when I looked at all that global financing pact which was done in France, I felt so much for Africa. Like, hey, we can do this, man. Imagine, let's say we just take that 80 billion which was done, the feasibility which was done. We say we want to raise capital in 6 years. That's less than 5 billion per nation in 6 years. You can pay that as capital. And then depending on how much you have paid, that's the money you get when the electricity is being paid for. I don't know, but I feel like sometimes our leaders have to do better, man. Whatever they are doing, they're not doing it right at the moment. When these leaders have to do better. When they are meeting in the AU, let AU work. It has to be an effective organization. It has to be very effective and efficient. Because if you're just coming up with these weird resolutions, 2020, 2020, 2050 resolution, 2020, 2030 resolution, we want you to implement stuff which works currently. the youth having access to capital. Because if you don't have small businesses, how can you build the economy? You need the middle class to be able to keep on growing. The middle class will grow to be a major company. You can't just start as a major company, but you also need capital. But if the capital is very expensive, it comes with the high interest rates, how can you afford to build better businesses? That's why we end up having high unemployment rates. We are just taking money to service the debt. Service the debt. Come on, man. We need to do better as African leaders. We really, really applaud you for your courage, for how you represented Africa at that summit, but a lot has to be done. A lot should be done right now. There's no more time to wait for tomorrow. We appreciate whatever effort you are doing, which is good, but we need to unite more to build some institutions for Africa alone. No, this what of observer status in those meetings. It has to be exclusive, just like the G7. You can't get in the G7 when you are not part of it. We also need African institutions like that, whereby it's exclusively for Africans. No other inclusions like one day observer status. We don't want to be infuriated. We need to represent African interests. As long as you can't represent African interests, other people, they will be representing their interests in your own backyard, in your own country, in your own house. And it's pathetic. You need to do better. We are asking you African leaders to unite and do better for us. For us, the youth. We can take over if you give us an opportunity. But we know that you need the power. You need to be there. But can you work for us, please? Can you work in favor of the people? Your own people. Those are the most important people. We can push it like a Cameroonian leader, like, yo, you need to do this and this and this and this. If we are united. But if you're not united, there's no way you're going to push in a certain leader. When I'm saying Cameroon, just an example. Don't take me like I was attacking Cameroon. I'm just saying you can do something. Again, before Zimbabwe, my country, like, hey, Zimbabwe, why don't you do this within this scheduled time? It's a task we are giving you. We are not asking you to go and do it. We are telling you to go and do it. There's a difference there. Some projects have to be met within the schedule, within the scheduled time, and that's what you're supposed to do. The time management is important on anything, and that has to be done for Africa to develop. The African Development Bank, I don't think it's a good bank, but I think we can build other institutions whereby we can invest ourselves. Only Africans, African nations, 54 nations. That's when you build that. When you go out there now to the World Bank, now you get respect because you have a good track record of what you've been doing on the ground. But by so doing, you create a lot of developments. You have your own bank, which is funding that. You know that this money is going to this and this company, this and this country, and this and this. And these companies has to be big for Africa, for the whole Africa. We can have companies who can service Africa. Just like the Dangote is a private institution, it's a private company, but it's quite good. It's really huge. It can service so many countries in Africa. So we can build something like that, which can service so many African nations. And even the rail, all this, if you have a big companies, it will be easier to build all these networks. The road networks, the rail networks, it will be easier because you have a company which can service that. But if you don't have that, if we don't have our own institutions which can fund them, we always go to the IMF begging, we are begging, we are not beggars, it will be just, blabbering. We need to implement some of these resolutions as soon as possible in our own nations, in Africa, for Africans. We can do this, man. We can do this. We can benchmark, we can take some models from Turkey, everything. Technology, the good thing about technology is everywhere now. From Turkey, Dubai, you can always get it if you want something. From China, from all these countries which are friendly and working with us. For those countries with the sanctions, just know that the sanctions will not be removed, man. You have to always find other ways of who you can trade with. Not to think like, oh, if I pay this, then the sanctions will be removed. Never. Never. Forget about that. Just do your own thing. Do your own business. Plan with other. If you, I don't understand. If you are sanctioned not to trade with 1 billion people, what about if you trade with the others 7 billion? Let's say there's 8 billion people in the world. If you're sanctioned not to trade with 1,000 billion, with 1 billion, you can still trade with 7 billion. So what's the complaint all about? I don't know, man. You're gonna do better for us African leaders. And this has been an episode of GPN. It is went on and on, man, because when you're talking about Africa, we feel like we have to do better for our continent, and we look forward to African nations, African leaders discussing issues which actually help Africans immediately, not something with 2050, 2060. When you are not in, when you are already gone as a leader, what are you implementing right now for the people? What are you doing for Africans, which can move generations into generations? You can pass it to the next generation. What are you doing? Because if you're just talking about simple things, come on, man, we need to do bigger things. If you're leaders, we need to deal with bigger problems. You can't be dealing with small problems when you're leaders. If you're African leaders, we need to deal with African problems so that it will be better. Don't just look at your individual countries. That will never work for us as a continent. Let's look with bigger visions, with bigger, with the bigger visions, so that we can fulfill that. You can't just keep on thinking about oh, my little country, my little country. Because when you think about it, that's when you get, when you get all these other challenges, like they can actually come up for you. Because when you're only by yourself, it's not a teamwork, they can easily target you, pinpoint you, and just come and attack you, or even remove you in power. With your good ideas, they can easily remove you in power in other nations. So you need to do better as a team. You need to do better on collaboration. You need to do better on implementation and time management of projects. They have to be implemented. For those who have that task, you'll be followed by, hey, what have you done, man? Mnangagwa, what have you done? HH, what have you done? Ramaphosa, what have you done? Calling each other up. Ruto, what's up? What have you done, man? Have you fulfilled this task we gave you? That is what is important for us. Not to just say sovereignty. There's no sovereignty when you're talking about sovereignty will come when you're dealing with an outsider, not as an African United or United Africa. Not as a United Africa. When you're at AU, you're just another person. You're just another leader. Your country is just like a province, like a governor reporting to the president. This has to be done. This has to be implemented. If you don't, we shouldn't be complaining about it. Because when anybody's looking at a black person, he's just looking at Africa. He's not looking at a Ghanaian. He's not looking at a Nigerian. The Nigerian will come later, but what comes first is an African. That's an African guy there. That's an African president there. That's an African. It's not like that's a Nigerian president there. It doesn't come first. What comes first is that's an African person there. So we need to represent our own people by doing good for our continent. We need to develop our continent. We need to do better for our continent, for our people, so that we live better. We do better, we live better. That's the concept, man. This has been another episode of GPN. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to me and being here. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you found this very informative. And I'll meet you on another episode of GNR, which I'll be doing almost weekly, on weekly basis. Be safe, be good, and let's work to build Africa, man. We are here to build the nation. We are here to build the continent. We are here to unite Africa. Let's do better. For now, I'm out. Ciao.